Next, we are going to have a look at the incrementing and decrementing operators. If we click on that link, PHP supports C-style pre- and post-increment and decrement operators. The increment-decrement operators only affect numbers and strings. Arrays, objects, and resources are not affected. Decrementing null value has no effect too, but incrementing them results in 1. And then we have a table which tells us ++a is a pre-increment, increments a by 1, then returns it. Then we have a++ post-increment, which basically returns a and then increments it by 1. Then we have -a, which is pre-decrement, and that decrements a by 1, then returns it. And then we have a minus, which is post-decrement, returns a, then decrements a by 1. Let's have a look at all this in the editor. So if we go back to the editor and we start with variable a, which we'll set to number 1, and then what we are going to do is echo ++a, and then let's add to it, say, number 2, and if we preview everything in browser, refresh our page, and there we get 4. And why do we get 4? Let's go back to the editor and I'm going to explain. First of all, we assign 1 to our variable. Then what we do, by using this double plus symbol before the variable, we are incrementing the a, the value associated with a, by 1. So this specific expression here increments the value associated with the a variable by 1. So 1 plus 1, we have 2. And then we add 2 to it. So if we remove this +2, what we are going to get is simply 2. There we go. So if you go back, now let's try and perhaps do the same with the array. And we know that the array should return and notice basically the error. So if we try this, obviously array to string conversion, as it's said here, obviously, the arrays, object, and resources are not affected. They will return basically, throw an error. So arrays, we can't do it. Then let's try with a null value. And what we are going to do, we are incrementing by 1, which in this case should return 1. Fair enough, we have it. But what's going to happen if we try again? If I just, first of all, let's remove this echo and let's do ++a again. This time, if we echo a variable, because the first time it's added 1, the second time it added 1. So now we should have browser refresh 2. There we go. Fair enough. So basically, when we started with null, we started with the same as if it was 0. So if we set it to 0, go to the browser, refresh the page, the same result. Now let's try with a string. Rather than 0, now let's put, let's say, sum. And we have pre-incremented the string twice. And now have a look at what's going to happen. If I save this and preview the page in a browser, we get SOMG. But hold on a second, G we have E here actually. If we go back to the editor, you can see we've got E. What's happened basically? This pre-incrementing has has changed the last letter of the string to the following one. So every time we pre-increment, basically, it changes the letter to the next one. So EF is the next one, and then next one again is G. That's why we get SOMG. If I comment this second one, we should get SOMF. So if we preview in a browser, and fair enough, that's what we get, basically. So that's how the string pre-incrementing works. Let's try with just one letter. And let's go for the capital letter Z. Capital Z. There we go. And if I just increment it once, pre-increment it once, if we save it and go to the browser, refresh it, we get A. And now what happens here basically, because Z is the last letter of the alphabet, it goes to the beginning of the alphabets. And it needs to indicate that the one round of the alphabet is already passed. So it places the A as the first one to indicate we've already done one round with the alphabet and we are starting with the second one. So the first letter of the alphabet is obviously A, that's why we get A as the second one. If I do the same with letter B, if we save it and preview it in a browser, we simply get C. But because it was Z, if I go back to Z, and if I now try and pre-increment it again, what we should get is A, B, basically, because the first one indicates that the first round is done, and then the second round is basically B, if we because it's obviously the second incrementation that we've done here. And if I try and do it again, then we obviously gonna get A, C, and so on. So basically that's how it works with the string. Let's now try post-incrementing operator. So if we go back to the editor, and the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to remove all this and start with a variable again. We assign 1 to it, and we simply go for echo a plus plus. Post-incrementing, because this plus to double plus symbol is after the variable rather than before the variable. So what's going to happen now, basically? What it does, it first returns the value associated with the variable, the original value, and then increments it. The other way that the previous one worked, because the other one first increment it and then return it. So the first echo should return 1, and then the second one, if I just echo break here, do the line break basically so we can see them on new lines basically. The first one should return 1 because it first returns the value, then increments it, but the second line should return 2 because obviously 1 incremented by 1 is 2. So if we save it and preview it in the browser, refresh the page, and there we go. So post-incrementing first returns, then increments. Pre-incrementing first increments, then returns the value basically. So that's how it works with that. And if we try the same here, basically, if we try and say add 2 to it, what is going to happen? Refresh the page. We get 3 because first what happens, we get A, the value associated with A, so it was 1. We added 2 to it, it gives us 3. But then we got A as 2, obviously, because A has been incremented by 1. That's why we get 3 and 2. Obviously, if we were to do it again, increment it, and then add, say, 2 again to it, so we are post-incrementing again. So what's going to happen now? A is 1, then we are basically adding 1 to 2, so we get 3 with this first statement. In the meantime, after this expression here, A has been incremented by 1, so this A here will be 2, and we are adding 2 to it. This should return 4, and then effectively, if we just echo, I'm just going to again create a new line here, the HTML BR tag, and then simply echo A. So we should get, first we're gonna get 3 because we are adding 2 to 1. In the meantime, we are incrementing after this expression. So now A is 2, we adding 2 to it, so that's going to return 4. Then we incremented this value after the expression because it's a post incremental. So this one, the last line, what should it return? We've got 1, 2, 3. We should get 3 here. So we've got, if we go back to the browser, there we go, we got 3, 4, and 3. Exactly what we would expect. If we try the same thing as we've done before with the array, obviously exactly same example, so I'm not even gonna try. Arrays just not, they won't work with pre and post incremental, decremental, so I'm not even gonna try that. But let's try with a string. Again, sum, we're going to start with this one, and I'm just going to remove this, and I'm just going to remove this addition here. Let's try and do it this way and preview it in the browser. Refresh the page. The first time what happens, we simply get the same value because it's post incremental, which means it first returns, then it's incrementing. So we are echoing basically what's been assigned to this variable. On the next line, when we are calling the same variable, it has its incremented value already. But the first time it will come with the original. And because we're incrementing, obviously after E, we get F. That's why we get SO, M, F, and fair enough. There we go. First one is sum, exactly as it was with the original assignment, and then we get the last letter incremented by 1. So that's basically how it works. It works pretty much the same as pre-incremental. The only difference is the first time around, when you're trying to return the value associated with it, it's not going to be incremented. It's going to be the original value, basically the previously assigned value to this variable, as opposed to pre-incrementing, which first increments and returns the value incremented already. So that's how it works. Let's now have a look at the decrementing section of it. So let's simply try with number 1. And what we are going to do next, on the next line, we are decrementing it. So basically it will return the value of the variable basically -1. So 1 minus 1, that should return 0 basically. It decrements before it returns, obviously decrementing. So if we save it, go back to the browser, refresh it, and there we go, 0 here. If I try and do it again, echo and now minus variable a, that should give us, well, you've guessed, -1. So there we go. So we've got the first time around it's 0, then you have -1, and obviously it can go as deep as you want, basically as many times as you're going to decrement it. So that's basically a simple decrementing. Let's try and add 2 to it. So we have a, which is 1, -1, basically deducting 1 from it, so that's going to give us 0 plus 2. That should give us what exactly? 2. There we go. And let's go for another example. Let's now try with null, and we know that incrementing null works just fine, but decrementing, we've been told, it simply returns null. Obviously we get nothing. As if we go back to the description, it says decrementing null value has no effect to, but incrementing them results in 1. So decrementing, obviously, if we assign null to the original value, the first the basic to the variable we are dealing with, and then trying to decrement it, that's going to return null. Now with the string, it works the same way, basically. The strings in decrementing, if we try with sum, for instance, what's going to happen if we have a look at the browser, refresh the page, we get sum. So basically didn't do anything, and I can decrement it as many times as I want, minus a, and it's not going to basically reduce the last of first or whichever letter we might be thinking it might do, because decrementing just doesn't affect strings. It's only with the incrementing and only with the A as CII alphabet, basic character set, which is just American Standard Code for information interchange. In other words, it's just American letters, basic English letters of the alphabet that are being incremented when we are using this approach. So against the same thing, if I try and let's say put A or even B to see if this is going to affect anything, and it won't, it just stays B. So that's pre-decrementing. Let's try post-decrementing now. And post-decrementing, if we start with simply number 1, then we use this variable, but we are going to decrement it after. So that's what that's going to basically first return 1, and then it's going to decrement it. So basically this first echo will return 1. Once it's been returned, then the following line will return 0. So if we go back to the browser, refresh it, and there we go. The first time we've got 1, the second time we have 0. On one line, obviously, because we haven't separated them with new line character or anything. So if I just put this BR to create the new line in the browser, there we go. The first time we have 1, the second time we have 0. If we go back to the editor, and what I'm going to do now is basically add 2 to it. So the first time around, we know because it's post-incrementing, it's decrementing, the first time around it's simply going to return 1 plus 2 is going to give us 3, and the second time we simply get 0 here. So if we save it and preview it in a browser, and there we go, 1 plus 2 is 3, and then because we decremented after returning the value from this variable, we got obviously 0. Array, again, same thing, it throws an error. Null, if we try with null, is going to be the same as with pre-decrementing. So if we save it, preview it in a browser, there we go, it's just 2, because what it does basically with the first time around, it didn't do. If we try without this plus 2, then we simply get null, because basically we added to null, we just added to, that's why we have this number 2 return. But apart from this, null, decrementing, pre or post decrementing, it just returns null. And string, again, the same situation as pre-decrementing, so sum, if I try like this, and if I just have one line to return it. If I try like this, if we go back to the browser, we have sum, and if I add another line basically, just to see if it's going to change anything, there we go, it's exactly the same. So strings aren't affected. Same if I try with the, let's say, Z letter, exactly same example, it's going to be double Z because strings aren't affected by decrementing, whether it's pre or post.